We are coming to you live from the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you can handle the truth. Good evening from Boston, Massachusetts. My name is Frank Allen. Tonight, special guest Kevin Annett. The Republic of Kanata is becoming stronger by the hour. And in view of our time situation here, I'm going to give you the numbers to call into the show, and we're going to get right to Kevin. Okay, you can call into the show live and ask a question at 800-313-9443. Or you can listen at 605-313-0163. If you'd like to watch or listen to Kevin Annett, he is on every Sunday at 6 p.m. at bbsradio.com/Here We Stand. All right, Kevin, go ahead.
Frank, how are you? It's good to be back.
Very good.
Well, one of the things that we sent out recently is description of stuff coming up in the new year. And for folks who don't know, 5 years ago, there was a convention in Winnipeg, which is the center part of Canada. And it formed really the basis for a republic in Canada. Now, it's funny about Americans. A lot of them, being half American myself, I know, I spend my life going back and forth across the border. And Americans have never taught much about Canada. So I'm not surprised that, there's not an awareness. And the media don't really report things going on either. But Canada never had a republic. We tried to have a revolution in 1837 and got defeated, our 1776. Everything's being run by the British Crown, top down. There's one guy who runs the country. He's the head of state. He's called the Governor General, appointed by the Queen. He can remove the government at any point. It's always been like that. So for a long time, a lot of people have been saying, we need a different deal altogether. And 5 years ago, there was a convention. We formed the basis, a legal framework for a republic. In the last 5 years, we've been working on the ground to sign people up to nullify the oath of allegiance to the crown, which every cop, every politician, every judge has to take. We've been getting amazing results in the last little while. People beginning to, give you an example, there's town councils across the country that are now starting to say we're not going to pay taxes to the feds anymore because it all goes overseas. It all goes into the coffers of the Bank of England and the Vatican Bank. And it's being soaked out of the country. We want to keep it here at home. People are beginning to form local assemblies where they take power back into the community. You see this happening all over, but of course it's never reported in the media. And so there's this whole kind of grassroots revolution happening across the country, and it's really exciting to be part of that,
I bet. It sounds like our revolution all over again for you.
Well, it really is, and it's an inspiration because I remember it was Thomas Jefferson who said that the American Republic will only survive if it has a revolution every 25 years. In other words, in every new generation. You got to not just take things as they are, but reinvent the republic, right? Make sure power is still in the hands of the people. And, you talk about that now, you're called a domestic terrorist, right? But it's the truth. And John Adams said the courts, the only way to ensure democracy was to make sure the courts remained in the hands of the people and not, once the law is in the hands of judges and governments run by professional politicians, you lose control of your own republic. And so I think what we're doing could be an inspiration to Americans to reclaim their own republic, that's been taken from them in many ways.
That's a good point. You say every 25 years. Well, that's because people's memories fade. They forget the Korean War. They forget the Vietnam War. They forget, all of the wars. And right now, the United States has never had boots on the ground except for the Crown. So,
Yeah.
do you expect any resistance from the Crown itself, like sending the QE2 over here, stripped down again?
Well, it's funny because the Crown is in real problems, the so-called Crown of England. It's kind of like what the Vatican's going through now. I don't know if you noticed there's this movie out now called Two Popes, and it's getting wide exposure, and it's trying to make the present Pope and his predecessor, Ratzinger, look like, a couple of good guys. That's always a sign of an institution in crisis and damage control, when they have to create all these big lies to make black look white. And a perfect example of that is when my friend in Dublin, Ireland, took me into the biggest cathedral there a few years ago, and there was only 30 people there on a Sunday morning in a church that seated over 500. And I think it's an example of all these institutions, what they're going through. They're collapsing. And really now the question is, are people going to be able to take it back into their own hands? Whether it's the church, whether it's the government, so that we're running it. And all these crimes aren't being done in our name, right? So, no, on the ground, we meet very little opposition. As a matter of fact, I was driving the other day, and a Mountie, Royal Canadian Mounted Police officer, who's kind of the epitome of the Crown agent, had a really bad history. This Mountie had stopped me, and he looked at my ID. He said, you're with that Republic, aren't you? I said, yeah, I expected a hassle. He said, well, good luck to you. It's long overdue.
Wow.
So, I mean, that's the kind of support, we're getting on the ground.
Well, that's the kind of support that we in the U.S. should be getting. And everybody is content to just drive to work, come back home, watch TV, and go to bed, and repeat that every day, including weekends. So you're really doing well.
Well, it often looks like, I know working as a minister, you have an access into people's lives that really a privilege, and doing funerals or weddings or whatever. And what I find with people is it sure looks like that, that people are stuck in that. But inside they're churning, for something different. And they do want us to have something better. Now, I think we're in a real age of transition. There's a shift going on. And people are discontented everywhere. And so it's really a question now of giving people the confidence that they have the answers in themselves. This is not about experts telling them what to do. It's about people recovering that same spirit that brought about America in the first place, right? Said we're not going to be ruled by tyrants, We're going to govern ourselves. And that's an idea that was unique in the world. America created that idea, really. And so it's time, I think, Americans took it back, right?
I think we need some more publicity from Canada down here so that they can witness the Republic of Kanata and it flourishing and taking down the Crown. And it's about time, because Canada can be a force to be reckoned with, and a great, powerful country next door to the U.S. And the U.S. Sort of thumbs their nose at Canada for some reason. I don't know why.
Well, it is odd, because there's a lot of connection between our cultures. I mean, the border is almost in name only. So many members of my family and a lot of people I know, they've got family on both sides. We share a common language and culture and background. And so, we can inspire each other a lot. And one thing I could get people to do is, there's up on Amazon under my name, Kevin Annett, Annett. If you look at, I've got 16 books there. And if you look at one of these books, it's called Establishing Liberty, the Case for Kanata. And in that book, we outline our vision, kind of some of the policies and program, Charter of Liberties, how we want to try to bring out this bring this republic about through the grassroots, not by getting people elected Parliament, because Parliament, every member of Parliament takes an oath of allegiance to the Queen, and nobody else, not to a constitution, not to the people. So they're her foreign agents operating in Parliament. They're not accountable to the people. So we don't run in elections. We say we boycott that. We create our own Republican assemblies in the neighborhoods. We eventually are going to have a Congress, grassroots democracy, right? People can be recalled, that whole bit, right? And so anyway, we lay that out. If people want to read about it, you can get that Establishing Liberty book, The Case for Kanata, right up on Amazon under Kevin Annett. We also talk about it on the radio show that you mentioned on BBS Radio. So it's a good way for people to connect. I know a lot of Canadians spend time in the States, and I think we've got to be sharing this information, all of us, right, regardless of our nationality.
Yes, I believe we should share everything, get together. I'm almost tempted to move up there with you, I swear, because I can see what's forming, and I can see that it's going to be much better than anything that exists or did exist before. It's if it catches on, I mean, we're doing our best to make sure that happens. And north of you in Ontario, it's where we get our biggest support. And there's assemblies happening. We're opening training schools where we're going to bring in people and train them as sheriffs, Republican sheriffs, who have the power to convene common law courts, militias to defend our communities, our children who are being apprehended so much. Those kinds of things we're trying to create on the ground. And so, I'll certainly keep you updated about all those developments. We're going to be opening those training schools in January, later this month, and trying to give people the confidence that to start acting, in the community and not wait for somebody to do it for them. Yes, and how do you qualify authority to these? Say you train a sheriff and he comes up against a Mountie. What's going to be the reaction?
Well, we've had those experiences when we were occupying some churches. About people probably know about my history exposing genocide and forcing these churches to admit some of their crimes. When we were peacefully occupying churches on Sundays, the cops would show up and we would say to them, "Look, we're engaged in peaceful action," and they never did anything because they saw that we weren't disturbing the peace or anything. We were just sharing information with churchgoers. But in terms of your question, what we do is we hand Mounties and other Crown officials a stand-down order. And it basically says you're serving a convicted criminal body known as the Crown of England. You're committing a felony. We are asking you to stand back, otherwise you're obstructing justice. And then we hand them another form asking them to sign it, and that way we deputize them as an agent of the local Republican Assembly and the local common law court, if there is one. So we get them to, we're not fighting these guys. We're appealing to their hearts and minds and trying to recruit them. That's our whole strategy, and that's a far more powerful approach than simply fighting them, which is what the system wants, and they get to bash us on the head and lock us up. But so we think we can win over a lot of people. The latest opinion poll has over 60% of Canadians, a majority, want a republic. So we got a huge mandate on our side, right?
Yes, you do. And it's about time. It really is, because I have a number of listeners from Canada, and they were so pleased to hear that you were going to be speaking on here as a habit. Welcome, Kevin. What's new? It's fantastic, and they love it. And the people who listen to you think it's remarkable what you're doing, and then that you're a true patriot.
Well, I want to thank you, Frank. Give me a platform all the time on your show. It's appreciated.
Well, I would like to stream. I don't know if you must have your shows recorded, I would say.
Yep. They're all all on this. They're all archived on that site that you have, the bbsradio.com/here we stand. Yep.
If you pick a couple, I'd love to play them an hour before this show starts, and also stream them.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'll do that.
Okay, fantastic.
Yep.
You know which ones are going to make a difference.
Yeah, we'll pick out some that talk specifically about the Republic, its vision, some of the issues that prompted it. Like, I can give you a few examples. The people are in an uproar in Canada because the present government of Justin Trudeau, it's made a deal with the Chinese where not only there's no limit. He removed all limit on Chinese investment. So the Chinese are buying up a lot of the resources of Canada, all over the north, all over British Columbia on the west coast, and all the liquid natural gas. It's all owned by the Chinese. He's also allowed them, he brought in a law called the Foreign Investment Protection Act, which allows the Chinese to station their own troops on Canadian soil to protect their investments, if you can believe it.
Oh, so, God. I don't
Chinese troops operating in northern British Columbia as security. We've even had pictures of this. And what they're also doing is, there was stuff in the news about the Trudeau government to launch this whitewash called the Missing Women Inquiry, because a lot of Aboriginal women and children have been going missing for many years. And it turns out that they're being terrorized off their land by these death squads run by the Chinese. Now, what have we found out? You know about the organ trafficking going on in Chinese prisons.
Yes.
That the army runs. They kill several thousand people every year and traffic their organs. The very generals running those prisons, some of them are on the board of directors of these liquid natural gas companies in British Columbia. And Trudeau's been meeting with these guys. Like, the Prime Minister is directly complicit in these crimes. And there's a real scandal brewing over this. So this is yet another reason why we got to bring in a new deal altogether, because of this. He's committing treason openly at the behest of the Chinese government.
See if you can get me some pictures of these Chinese soldiers, and I will use it wisely.
Thank you. Yeah, no, definitely. It's I've had over 30 years working on the streets of Vancouver as a minister, and I would meet. There's thousands of natives living on the street. A lot of these homeless guys are the women working as prostitutes. They're all being forced off their land by their own chiefs, working for these companies, uranium, oil, water companies, and they've got the inside scoop. They tell me about this stuff all the time, these survivors,
Yes, and the crimes that you've uncovered, or should I say uncovered again, I think is the proper phrase there, the mass graves and whatnot. It's just, to the people of the U.S., that's too much to believe. They have to go into denial for a couple of months before they'll even read it, Well,
it's a horrible thing. If people don't know, my site, murderbydecree.com, it's got it all documented, 25 years of research. And it's a hard thing to believe at first, especially since people have been fed this line that Canada's such a nice place, right? You get that all the time. Canadians are so polite and all that. But it's all a cover. What it really means by politeness is we don't want to rock the boat. We're afraid of offending anyone in authority. It's why I'm in exile from my own country, because they don't want to look at this stuff. They can't believe they did this. But, facts are facts.
Yes, and they've just uncovered some Native American graves around a log cabin. And, that went viral everywhere. And I just cannot believe that reporters down here have not hung in Canada with you and traveled to these sites, because I just don't understand it. I don't know, a deal with the Crown maybe? Yeah,
well, don't forget, a lot of the media is big money. Who owns the money? The the Crown of England, the Vatican, they got a vast media network. And, they're one and the same power, really. But we've had individual journalists. Like, I remember taking a couple of American journalists. One was a freelance. He was actually an award-winning filmmaker, worked for PBS for a while. And I brought him up to the site of the mass grave at the, they call it the Mush Hole, the Brantford Anglican School for the Mohawk Indian children in Brantford, Ontario. We found a mass grave there. We unearthed stuff that, after witnesses pointed out sites where kids were buried, they had buried children in these sites. We went in with accredited archaeologists. We found bones within an hour. We sent them down to the Smithsonian Institute in Washington. They were confirmed to be the bones of little kids that had been cut up and burned, buried right under the trees where, they said they always planted trees on tops of kids who had been buried. Sure enough, there were these buttons from around 1930 in the roots of these trees, right? Just like the witnesses say. You think one media outlet reported it? The only one to report it was a Mohawk Indian newspaper. All the media in Canada and the U.S., it just totally blacked out that story. That was in late 2011, early 2012. So, that's what you're up against. And even the alternative media, like shows like this, people, like you say, the memory is so short, people forget that stuff happened. Like they're forgetting that, and that's that movie I mentioned, The Two Popes. One of the reasons they're putting that out now, it's the 7th anniversary of Ratzinger stepping down, Pope Benedict, in February 2013. He stepped down because the Spanish government looked at the material in our court case about Ratzinger, and they wrote to him and said, you might face arrest if you come to Spain. The guy steps down 6 days later, because he knew he was going to face arrest. And that got blacked out, and they're putting in their own spin now to explain what happened then, from their point of view. So it has an impact, but the system does everything possible to wipe out the memory right away about this stuff, right?
They certainly do. And talk about putting a spin on things. I have never seen anything like what goes on in this country with major news. Like CNN, MSNBC. I think they're actually dictated what to print and or actually say and what not to say. Because you have smaller organizations like Activist Post is one who will take your story and run with it. And I think I'm going to go ahead and send it along to them. As a matter of fact, we have a journalist who was writing for Activist Post. Now, there's The Guardian. I don't know. They're wide open, too, but they must be privy to it. They have to be, right?
Yeah, well, it's funny because even I remember years ago finding out that how much big money is behind even some of the alternative media and these so-called different movements. Like, I had experience of this. Here's an example. Out on the West Coast where I was a minister, there was a lot of logging going on, a lot of protests to try to save the old-growth forests, right? Well, Greenpeace, the environmental group, right?
Yes.
They wouldn't get involved in the protest. I thought, that's really weird. And I traced it down, and they have a committee of advisors that determines what campaigns they're going to do. Well, this committee is funded by Sunoco, Sun Oil Company. Okay, so it's big oil funding the environmental movements and telling them the campaigns they can be involved in. Turns out Sunoco had investments in the companies that were logging the oak-growth forest, so they told Greenpeace to back off, and they did because they're their funders. So you got to really follow the money, even with these groups that claim to be working for change. You got to say, okay, well, first question I always ask people, who funds you, right? Who set you up? And when people don't want to answer that, that's a red flag for me, but,
Yes, that's very interesting. You should say Sun Oil Company, because they actually were. I'm trying to think who they were involved with, but they're backing Greenpeace.
Oh, they fund them through. It's called the Pew Foundation.
Okay.
PEW, Pew Foundation, funded by Sunoco, and Hugh, he was in one of the original, he was like a Methodist or something 100 years ago who set up the company, and it was an endowment they set up to fund, different movements and progressive groups. And it's like Eli Lilly, the big pharma company. They fund all the churches. They've got a thing called the Fund for Theological Education. They fund all the seminaries where you train priests and ministers. And guess who provided kids for Eli Lilly drug testing experiments? Churches, kids from church orphanages, Indian schools. It was a deal, right, between Big Pharma and the churches. That's something else we uncovered. So it's, it's the old adage, you got to follow the money, right? See where it leads.
I guess we're going to have to do that a lot more down here, and we'll find out what happens.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of times it's very difficult down here because there's so many corporations attached that don't do anything. I mean, if you go there's a locked door, and
right,
see you next month or something like that on the door. So
yeah, and the information is so controlled now. It's hard to do the kind of research that you could do 20 years ago. The information's more controlled. Even last time I was in Toronto, I went in. I tried to go into the head office of my former church, the one that got rid of me, the United Church of Canada. They've got it in a lockdown now. You can't even go up in the elevator. You need a special security pass. These guys know they're guilty, and they're just they're hiding more and more, which is a sign of guilt. But it's kind of a symbol of what you're up against when you try looking into this stuff.
Yes, and in this country, I don't know about Canada, but in this country, the archdiocese have rented out all of the steeples for, guess what? Cell
5G.
phone equipment.
Yeah.
We call them death towers down here.
Right. Well, when you trace the investments of the Vatican Bank, they're heavily into the arms industry, big pharma, they own the biggest small arms company in the world, Beretta Limited, 100% Vatican-owned, landmines, all that shit. And so, no, it's a big business like any.
Yeah, that's unreal. So the Vatican is actually a gigantic corporation who swallows up smaller companies, is in on arms deals, probably deeper than any other corporation that exists. They have all this extra money they don't know what to do with because they don't pay any taxes. At least in the United States, they don't.
Well, there's two banks in the world that they're called extra jurisdictional. They're outside all jurisdictions. That's the Vatican Bank. The Vatican Bank, the Bank of England, which is a subsidiary of the Vatican Bank, and then the Bank of International Settlements in Zurich, Switzerland. And nobody can trace the money. Once it goes into those black holes, you don't know where it goes, right? So they do a lot of laundering and stuff for not only organized crime, but all the big banks around the world.
Okay, Kevin, we have to go to commercial for our station identification. We'll be back in 3 minutes. Thank you for listening.
You are tuned in to the Republic Broadcasting Network. Visit our website by going to republicbroadcasting.org.
Folks, we're living in a world the likes of which we've never perceived any clearer than we do now. The plan for global governance has been in the works for generations and would have likely been achieved by now but for the fact that the globalists left open their Achilles heel. With all their tools, Federal Reserve System, fiat currency, no child left behind, and then Common Core education introduced to our schools to dumb us down, vaccines, pharmaceuticals to lobotomize us, GMO foods, insertion of compromised or bought and paid for politicians, judges, mainstream media propaganda, all pieced together like a puzzle designed to ultimately bring the world under submission. But with all their strategy, they forgot one thing: knowledge. And knowledge is power. With knowledge, their bombardment is nullified. Folks, with that, as brilliant and knowledgeable as you've become, among the wisest audience of any radio audience in the world, and you are, I want you to take a moment to reflect and ask yourself, how much of that knowledge did I obtain from Republic Broadcasting Network? How high has my consciousness been raised since I've been a listener? How fast am I now able to discriminate truth from fake news by being a Republic Broadcasting listener? How clear am I now able to see the world since I've been listening to RBN? Ask yourselves those questions, folks. Then ask yourself, what is that knowledge worth to me? Like my morning coffee, how would I survive without it? A voice of truth in a sea of lies. Do we not all need to make sure it survives? Like public broadcasting, we are now finding we can only survive with listener support. Censorship, advertisers being attacked, truth itself being attacked. It's the only way through this. We at Republic Broadcasting humbly ask you to become a supporter. Look at your budget and make a determination of what Republic Broadcasting is worth to you and what you can afford on a monthly basis. Go to republicbroadcasting.org and pledge 20, 30, 40, 50, if possible, 100 a month or more if it's affordable. Click the donate button and become a regular monthly donor. Assure both us and yourself that Republic Broadcasting truth will continue to flow like that morning coffee. The network thanks you.
The reviews for Extendivite are amazing. Here are some from Amazon. September 2018. Extendivite works in keeping my blood pressure in the normal range. I've been using Extendivite for many years now. May 2018. Great product. I use regularly and I rarely get sick. March 2018. This product has relieved what appeared to be angina pain in my chest and shortness of breath after climbing stairs. I'm quite happy about it. February 2018. My husband, son, and I have been using this product for a few months now, and we have noticed an improvement in our joints and blood pressure. Tell us your story. Get Extendivite today. To order, call 1-877-928-8822. That's 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
Good evening from Boston, Massachusetts. My name is Frank Allen. Tonight, special guest Kevin Annett from Canada, who has been fighting a 25-year battle against the Crown. So let's celebrate the Republic of Kanata. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, well, I guess we finished off talking about the Vatican Bank and the kind of octopus connection and everything. I don't think most Americans know that taxpayers' money in your country is channeled right into the Vatican Bank, along with in 100 other countries or more. They got these. It's called a financial concordat, which is like an agreement with the Vatican. And without your knowledge or consent, your money is going to fund that big corporation that's involved in the arms industry, that's got a policy of covering up child rape when it happens, trafficking children, the whole bit, involved in these genocidal crimes over the centuries. So, I mean, that should be put to vote. I mean, do you want your tax money going to fund that without your knowledge? If you ask your congressman or senator, they'll probably don't even know it exists. But there's a good website called concordatwatch.eu, and it documents what these concordats are and how they operate secretly. And so that's one of the ways, when we talk about tracing the money, if you want to stop these crimes, you got to turn off the cash flow to them, right?
Yes, we do. And I just learned that about our tax money going to the Vatican about a week ago, I believe. And I was astonished, and I said, well, that's got to be a mistake. Who would allow that? But to hear it from you, it's now etched in stone. But so I take it in the Vatican Bank, the interest paid to the depositor is quite a bit more. That's just a guess.
Well, I mean, the whole thing is just so connected with organized crime and these offshore interests. I mean, I remember one of the first times I went to Rome. It was in 2009, And I had been invited to come over with some Native people to give a presentation to a human rights commission in the Italian Parliament. And I was talking to these guys. This one old Italian senator in his 70s came over to me, and he was kind of concerned for my safety. And this is like a senior politician, right? He said, well, you know, if you take on the Vatican, you got to realize the mafia and the government and the Vatican, they're all the same people. And all they're concerned about is their money, and they'll do anything to protect it. They'll kill anybody. And, you know, I remember, you know, that Pope that got poisoned, John Paul I, back in 1978. He was dead after a month in office because he began to look into the Vatican Bank too close. And every single person who was the nun who attended him, his friends, the magistrates who were investigating his death, they're all dead within 2 years. Car bombs, assassinations, heart attacks, you know, and they're going to knock off one of their own if they get too close. That's the kind of criminal syndicate you're dealing with, right? But the people in the pews don't realize. You know. Pardon?
Yeah, they'll core the apple for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had no idea, and I am still rather dumbfounded by it, and I hope I'm going to get the message out that that's where our tax money is going in a big way, and I've got a lot of work to do. You know what happens, Kevin? The more research I do here in the U.S., the sicker I get. And it's probably the same thing that's happened to you in Canada, to the point where you've had enough of the Crown and all the deviant ways that they have tricked the people in Canada.
Yep. Oh, definitely. And they get away with it so easily because in Canada, you're taught from a young age, you're a subject of the Crown. They plant that word in your head, subject. You're not a citizen, right? Like you're raised in America to say, you know, I swear allegiance to the Republic. You know, as a citizen, you're raised for that, but not in Canada. So it's that mental slavery people got to get from under. When I give workshops and give talks to people about the Republic, Kanata, they say, "Oh, are we allowed to do that?" Well, what do you mean you're allowed? Like, you know, like Canadians, when they're on a protest, they'll stop at red lights, right? They won't walk through. The old saying, this is true if you watch a group of Canadians. If you bump into a Canadian and it's your fault, they'll apologize to you. Oh, sorry. Well, sorry for what? I bumped into you, right? But that's the mentality. We're always apologizing for something. We don't believe in ourselves, and that's a problem when you're taking on these powers, right?
Yeah, in the United States, we are taught when we're small to think of Canada as an independent nation away from the Crown, just like the United States is separated from the Crown in a Revolutionary War. So, you know, a lot of people do not realize your situation at all. So we really have to get some independent newspapers involved, and I know just how to do it.
Well, that'd be great, Frank, because, it's just... here's another example. 80% of the laws passed in Canada. It's done by what's called the Privy Council. Privy Council goes back to the Middle Ages. It's the inside bureaucrats and friends of the Crown. 5 guys in a room, they write up a law and pass it. It's never even been debated in Parliament. That's how most laws happen in Canada. So, I mean, that's not a democracy. That's not, that's like something out of the Middle Ages. The king's flunkies writing up laws, right?
Well, we have our own king's flunkies over here because we have lobbyists that are paid a lot of money to get laws put in place. And we should pull all of our representatives and all of our senators right the hell out of there. Yep. And the people don't realize that in the U.S., we can do that. If a representative is not doing his job, we can pull him right out of there.
Yeah, and you got great things like the grand jury system, where you can sit in judgment of the courts and the government. It's like a fourth arm of government. And that's another thing we're trying to start up in Canada, grand jury system, to investigate, whether court action should be brought. You got locally elected sheriffs, the counties in America, who are answerable to the local voters, not to the feds. You got these common law traditions out of England, right, where the people were locally self-governing themselves. And so, there's a lot of good things in America. It's in your history, but people are not taught to value them anymore, right?
Right, and unfortunately, a lot of the sheriffs are not taught the values either, because they act in such a way as to make themselves higher or better than the people. And it says right on the side of our cars down here to serve and protect, And, I will say that the police departments are good. They do their jobs. And in some terms, there's got to be one bad apple in every other barrel, at least. That's the way I look at it. But in general, the police do their jobs well.
Yep. No, I agree. And, the thing is, a lot of these, I remember reading about, at the airport security, the TSA guys, over half of those guys don't even work for the government. They're private contractors working for General Dynamics Corporation. Okay? And they got a quota. They got to, it's like private for-profit prisons, They get more money the more people they imprison. So it's that kind of system of, when money takes over, they're not accountable anymore, right? So that's something that's a problem, big time.
Yeah, so this will be a massive reorganization of your entire country, and it's going to be, you're doing it now. You're training people immediately to fall into place as soon as the Republic of Kanata is instated. So,
yeah, and when we get enough of a momentum, we get a critical mass, we're going to hold a national, it's really a convention, a congressional convention where we elect delegates to the first Congress. And at that point, we just take over. We say, switch sides, people. The old system's done. So this is a peaceful grassroots revolution we're talking about, right? I'm sure it'll lead to confrontation, but the point is, if you've got the majority of people on your side, that's when change happens.
That's right. Well, that's what we're looking for in the United States, the targeted individual movement, and that is numbers. We went to Washington this year, and we had a very, very good turnout, but I'd like to see us go there with 1,000 people, rather than 100 or 150,
Oh, definitely.
Numbers talk.
Yeah, for sure. They sure do.
And numbers mean votes. And you are winning people over one person at a time, and that's the best way to form a government. Not literally, but essentially, you are winning the entire country of Canada over one by one.
Yeah, and that's you don't have to get the majority even. You get around 5-10%, and things shift. We see that in history, but things are so unstable in Canada. The corruption is so obvious that a lot of people are open to something different. So we have an impact far greater than our numbers, and I see that all the time. It's like me and about 24 people forced Canada to admit genocide, and we helped force, Ratzinger to step down 7 years ago. And it shows you the power of it's not even about numbers, but like where you are. If the truth is on your side and you keep pushing, you don't give up. It's about will, right? They buckle all the time. That's what I've found.
Yeah, that's a good point. So you're saying 5 to 10% is a tipping point. Yep,
and sometimes even less. It's but the thing is, they never let you think that you've had an effect. They always make it look like they've caused this change, right? So, we've got to see past the official stuff to look at just, our own experience of the kind of victories we have won and why that's happened, right? I mean, the people have tremendous power once they exercise it, and tremendous common sense and goodwill. We just got to mobilize it,
Right. It's like people all over the world. If you look in the UK, or if you look in Russia, the family wakes up in the morning and they don't want to have war with the U.S., or they don't want to have war with the U.K. Families, it's a mirror everywhere. It's the governments that are at fault. And we see this everywhere, all over the world. Your basic family unit doesn't want any war. They want things to go on essentially the way they are.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But I think you shook the tree, and the right people fell out.
Right. Well, it's kind of funny because I think people who do crime and then get away with it, they've got a secret death wish. They want to be outed out, and they all. I mean, I've had people on the inside, cops, politicians, others come forward and give me information because they want to see the right thing to happen, but they're worried about their pension. Usual excuses. But just because people go along with the system doesn't mean they support it, right?
Exactly. You find all of a sudden all these people jump out and say, we've been waiting for this to happen for years. But there's a lot of people that they're not activist material, but they are voter material,
Yeah. Oh, and the young generation, though, they're great. They're. I remember back when I was growing up, like 40 years ago, it would take a while for there to get momentum built up on an issue. Now people know about it right away, right? There's that instant awareness about stuff, and it's a matter of but the problem is people are fractured onto a million different issues, and they hear the bad stuff and never any of the victories. So we got to share more of the stuff with them,
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up, I think it was France, I'm not sure. At this point in time, it just escapes me, but they were having a riot. They were rioting in the streets, and then all of a sudden, the police gave in and sided with the people. I thought that was fantastic.
Well, that's the tipping point. That's how revolutions happen.
Yeah. So that's what's happening in Canada, and God, you've done such a great job. I don't know how you've done it, and you've done it a little bit at a time and really worked hard over 25 years now. And
the January 23rd of this year, it'll be 25 years since I got fired from the United Church for bringing out these crimes that happened to the Indian kids, and it just snowballed after that because I didn't give up, and I had the evidence on my side. And I like that saying. I'm trying to remember who said it. One man in the truth makes a majority, and I certainly proved that.
Yeah, you sure did. Oh, I think you're going to be, I don't know what you'd call it, I would say president. And I hope you end up being the first president of the Republic of Kanata.
Well, we'll see. I mean, it's looking better all the time, Frank, and we just got to get out the word more. I did run in the last election, but not to get elected. There were 5 of us on the running for the Republican Party of Kanata on this program of independence. And it's funny, we're the only party running that were reflecting the majority wish of Canadians to have a republic. Nobody else wanted to talk about it, right? Because they're all on the take. I mean, they're all taking oath of allegiance to the crown. They're all paid by them, and it's,
yeah,
it's hard
sometimes it's hard to find hardworking, honest people that want things correct. They want things to be legal. They want things to be true, and they don't want to see anybody on the take. And you'll see them pouring when you get to a point, pouring out of homes when you walk down the street with your people. And I think that's what you're going to see very soon.
Well, I sure hope so. I mean, things indicate that. Yeah, it's definitely heading in that direction. By the way, Frank, I just emailed you those links to 3 different programs on the Republic and that link to the Concordat agreements with the Vatican Bank.
Okay, great. Yeah, I would like to. I'm going to learn as much as I can about Canada and in your plight in Canada, and I'm going to make it known to the Guardian, first of all. Not the Guardian, excuse me, Activist Post, right away.
Yep.
And, Janet, I'm going to say Janet P. is actually a reporter and she writes for Activist Post. And I think she'll be more than happy to do a piece on it.
That'd be great, Frank. Thank you.
And we'll send it to you when it comes out. How's that?
Good. Oh, and I should tell folks who are listening that they can reach me. My email's thecommonland@gmail.com. And I tour all over the States and Canada all the time giving talks. So love to come to Boston. I love the place. I got friends all over New England. So.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yep. We'll let you know when we're going to have an event in town. And
I'd love to be there. Away. Yeah, I'd love to do that.
Do you have any situations of targeted individuals that you found in Canada?
Yeah, me. I get contacted by folks like that all the time, and it can happen more effectively in Canada because there's no tradition of independent anything here. It's all owned by the Crown, like all the different agencies. The courts. Here's an example. The Chief of the Supreme Court of Canada sits in the Privy Council. That's like Chief Justice in America sitting in the President's cabinet. There's no separation of any branch of government. It's all the old boys network working together. So it's easy to target people. Like the cops don't lay criminal charges in Canada. The Attorney General does. He's the party in power. It's a British colonial system of using the law to take out their opponents, and it's a lot of cases of people being wiped out right under the noses of people, and there's no recourse, there's no help coming, and so we could have a whole show on that, target individuals and what it's like in Canada.
Okay, all I can picture when I see Canada and the government is I see an old ancient castle with a drawbridge and the Republic of Kanata surrounding the castle. This is it's probably silly, but that's what I just saw. And
that's a good image, kind of accurate too.
Yeah, there are so many governments all over the world that take advantage of their people, and fortunately, in your country and our country, we have the means to bring about change, and that's important. If you can't bring about change, you have a dictatorship, and that's what our fear is in the U.S., believe it or not, because not so much a dictatorship because we have the checks and balances system, but we have been inundated with executive orders. Executive orders weren't as common as they are today. I mean, I think Obama wrote more of them than anybody else.
Well, every president seems to rely on them more and more, and
yes,
it's just it's why there was a revolution, that kind of executive branch running. American presidents, for decades now, have had more power than kings. With the right to order war without congressional approval, all of that. It's just not what the founding fathers imagined. They have a real check and balance on that, and that's gone now. So it's problem with the system. It's both parties play the game, right?
Right. And we had a judge that was pondering our Second Amendment rights. And I told everybody, I said, he shouldn't be pondering it. He should be adhering to it. Yeah. That's the law.
Yeah.
You don't.
I thought that was his oath of office. He had to adhere to the Constitution.
Yeah. It's crazy. Okay, we've got probably about a minute left. Do you want to sneak something in?
Well, there's stuff happening in January. I'll keep sending you updates about that. Our training schools. I'll be holding a press conference January 23rd on the 25th anniversary, and I'll send you all the info on that. We can, you could help cover that, get the word out about that. And like I say to folks, murderbydecree.com, look in there under ITCCS updates for our news postings, and write me at thecommonland@gmail.com, and look at for all my books on Amazon.
Okay. That's great. Well, you're doing a fantastic job up there, and I hope that the people look at what you've done or what you're doing up there and say, hey, we don't like what's happening here either. And, pull some officials out of office.
Yeah, we got to join hands across the border. So
yeah, we'll do that.
Definitely do that. Thank you, Frank. I really appreciate it, as always.
I'd like to thank you, Kevin, and we'll see you next time. And good night from Boston, Massachusetts. Yep. My name is Frank Allen.
Tired of being lied to by mass media? It's growing more and more apparent today that news is received less and less through standard media outlets. Even with a growing audience every day, RBN is beginning to direct more efforts into social media. Social media and the use of the internet is fast becoming the primary source of people for news, regardless of demographic. RBN has set out to provide some of the best news on the internet through republicbroadcasting.org, and also has begun to use the tools to our advantage by way of social media. Republic Broadcasting is now operating a Facebook page to function as yet another avenue to have our collective voice reach new audiences across not only America, but across the globe as well. The Facebook page features not only news, but also an RBN player to listen to our broadcasts. Get involved by visiting facebook.com/Republic Broadcasting and liking our page and share it with your friends and family, because you can handle the truth.
This is RBN, the Republic Broadcasting Network. Casting 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 Network.